All right, thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started on today's webinar because we have a lot of great topics to cover, and I know you're going to have a lot of great questions. So thank you for joining us for the Southeast Energy Insecurity Initiative subject matter expert webinar. This is the first we're having, and it's on understanding utility business models, which I know everyone has questions about. I'm Jen Weiss. I'm at the Nicholas Institute at Duke University. We have partnered on this initiative with Appalachian Voices and the North Carolina Justice Center. I am joined today by my colleague, Allie Garrett, and I believe also Claire Williamson from the NC Justice Center. So thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. I do a couple of logistical things just right off the top. This webinar will be recorded, so if you are unable to watch the entire webinar or you want to share it with your colleagues, we will be sending out the recording later this week. Also, this is going to be kind of a large group, so I'm going to ask if you could keep your lines muted unless you are speaking as part of the panel. We will ask, though, we want to encourage your questions, so please feel free to use that chat function to ask your questions. We will try to answer as many questions as we can on today's webinar, but given that it's only an hour, we may not get to all of them. And so what we will likely do is follow up in the next week or so with responses to all of the questions. I'll ask my panelists to give you some good responses to them. So please feel free to drop them in the chat. If we don't get them today, we will get you the answers as soon as we can. Kind of already started on our agenda here. I've already done the welcome. I'm going to introduce our panelists in just a second, and then we're going to turn to the meaty part of the webinar. We're going to really dive into an overview of the regulatory framework for the different types of utilities that are here in the Southeast, and to talk a bit about how to engage with the utilities, how U.S. stakeholders can engage with your utilities. And then we want to talk about some programs that are currently being offered to address energy insecurity with the utilities, and kind of a framework for how we can be thinking about building solutions, working with them. And finally, like I said, if we have time, we will do a little bit of Q&A at the end. I think a lot of you have probably been along with us for the ride on this project. We started back in January of 2021 and kicked off this project. We had a workshop back in May 27th of 2021, where a lot of you probably engaged with us. The project goals, just to reiterate, are to measure and characterize the causes and impacts of energy burden and insecurity in the Southeast. So we really want to gain an understanding of it and start to build the story and the narrative around what is happening here. And then we want to work together to devise regional sustainable solutions to address this energy insecurity in our states. Definitely this is a collaborative effort. And so, all hands on deck as we start to think through these solutions. And finally, last, and it's certainly not least, is just fostering this collaboration among leaders in the space. We know that all of you are working in this space, and we want to help you network and share your ideas and thoughts and get to the right partners to work on them. One of the things I'm really excited about is as we go through this, we identify different topics that just need a deeper dive. So we start to think through things, and we start to say, hey, I have questions on this. I want to understand this. Well, utilities are a very integral part of this solution, and often are sometimes misunderstood or are so complex that I'm not sure people completely understand what the utilities have to go through to launch programs. So that's the intent of this webinar today, is to give our panelists, our speakers today, a chance to kind of lay the foundation for you all, to explain a little bit about the different types of utilities, the different business models, and the different ways that we can interact with the utilities in order to move this work forward together. And so I'm just really excited and pleased to introduce just this all-star cast of utility representatives today. You're going to be hearing from each of them throughout this hour webinar. But quickly, I'm joined by Therese Griffin, who is the Manager of Energy Efficiency and Demand Side Management at Dominion Energy in South Carolina, by Patricia Housand, who's the Manager of Program Development at Santee Cooper, Linda Schaefer, who's the Strategy and Collaboratory Manager at Duke Energy. We're also joined by Jeff Smith, the Energy Efficiency Strategy Manager at Southern Company, and not his twin, but also Mike Smith, the VP of Business and Technology Strategy of the Electric Cooperatives of South Carolina. So a huge thank you to all 5 of you for joining us today on this panel. And without further ado, I want to kick off the first part of this. So I think the most important foundational part that we can do, educational piece that we can do, is to just give you an overview of the regulatory framework that each of our different types of utilities face. And so I think you all probably know this, but in the Southeast, we've got 4 different kinds of utilities that operate here. We have investor-owned utilities, we have electric membership cooperatives, we have public power utilities, which are state-owned, and we have municipal electric utilities, which are local government-owned. So obviously, each of those are going to have different types of frameworks and business models associated with them. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to give you a little bit more in-depth view into what their regulatory framework is. And so I'm going to start it off with Therese Griffin.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Jen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about investor-owned utilities. I have 3 minutes and 2 slides to cover a topic that we could probably spend all day on. But we'll get through it, and we are interested in your questions. And again, as Jen said, you know, this is, we wanted to create an opportunity to have a conversation about how utilities operate in the framework of providing energy efficiency and demand side management programs. So I think many of you know, but I know not everyone may know about the operating framework of IOUs. So Dominion Energy is an investor-owned utility, Duke is, and Southern is as well. We're vertically integrated. We either own or control generation, transmission, and distribution that goes directly to residential, commercial, and industrial customers. That system, the generation, the transmission, the distribution, all of that is financed through shareholders and bonds. And those investments are recovered through the rates process. So the traditional operating model is changing, as many of you know. There's lots of grid improvement activity going on throughout the United States with regard to utility systems. The Southeast is no different. There is more solar on our systems than we've ever had before. Wind is coming along, and we are more and more getting engaged in electric vehicles and other distributed generation. We all have sustainability goals. Dominion Energy has a net zero greenhouse gas emissions goal by 2050 that we are pursuing. Energy efficiency will play a role in that. With regard to the regulatory framework, some of you may have heard the term public interest. We are organized around a regulatory model that seeks to protect the public interest. That is the role that our regulators have in our various jurisdictions. We have an obligation to serve in exchange for that opportunity to serve customers as a regulated monopoly. We have an obligation to serve, and in exchange for that, there is a reasonable rate of return on the investment. So utilities recover their costs for operating, but they earn on the investment that they make in the system. So in those wires and pipes that you see, that's how the company earns a rate of return. Within that framework, there are DSM programs that are offered to customers at the residential, commercial, and industrial level. We are generally allowed to recover program costs. There's a net loss revenue factor, and there's generally a performance-based incentive for utilities to offer these programs to customers. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Oh, one more back one. There you go. So with regard to demand side management programs, and I'll offer that, you know, we have Linda Schaefer and Jeff Smith on call that can kind of chime in on what happens within their organizations, but they're generally governed by both statutory and regulatory requirements or mandates that we have to run the program. Sometimes those mandates might look like a target, a savings target. Sometimes those mandates might look like who we serve and how we serve customers with these programs. They can vary by policy, they can vary by jurisdiction, but we all follow a certain regulatory cycle. So our cycle in South Carolina is a 5-year program cycle, and then on an annual basis, we provide updates. We are required to work with a collaborative group. In our case, it's an energy efficiency advisory group that provides us with advice and input on how the programs are operated and measured and reported as well. So there's opportunity for input during these cycles, either on the 3 or 5 year basis or on an annual basis. There's an opportunity to intervene and comment on our filing. So we have to meet these stringent guidelines within this regulatory framework. In our case, we have to have a third party evaluate the programs on an annual basis and provide a report to the commission. The commission, looks at the report and determines whether or not the programs are meeting their expectations. We work with our stakeholders to constantly modify the program. So during the year, we are constantly working to tweak and modify the program so that they achieve the forecast that we've set out for energy savings, for demand savings, or for participation goals. There's no guarantee, as you might imagine, that these programs are going to be successful. They all depend on consumer behavior and adoption in the market. And generally, it takes time for new programs to take hold in the market. So these 3 and 5 year cycles are in place for that reason. That may seem like a long time to you, but it's really not when you're talking about program implementation. Low income programs across the board are a priority for regulators, stakeholders, and utilities. I will tell you, within our collaborative discussions, we spend a lot of time talking about low to moderate income programs, how our low to moderate income programs are performing, and what we can do better. How can we get deeper savings into those homes? And so it's a focus that comes up within the context of these annual filings that we have, as well as our petition for program updates or new programs. And then we often partner with the community and social service agencies to income qualify program participants in the low to moderate income community. That's not something that utilities generally want to take on. And so in our case, we actually qualify whole communities through our low income program. So we're looking at US Census data, and if 50% of the homes in that community are at 100, actually we went to 200% of the federal poverty guideline, then we will qualify the entire neighborhood. So only 50% of the homes have to qualify at 200% for all of the residents in that community to be able to participate in the program. There are other programs at other utilities where they are actually qualifying individual participants, but they generally are working through community action agencies or other social service agencies. That's the way it works with our parent company in Virginia. They work through the weatherization organizations to qualify individual homeowners to participate in their weatherization program for low-income customers. So that's a very general framework for us to sort of start the conversation. And I think we're going to go to the end for questions. So I'm going to pitch it to Mike, who's going to talk about member-owned utilities. Mike Smith.
Thank you, Therese.
Hey, Mike.
So cooperatives operate a little bit differently, and we normally call ourselves member-owned utilities. And I'm using the term very loosely, vertically integrated, but for a cooperative, we're built from the bottom, from the service to the home or business up. And so we're vertically integrated in pieces. We either own, control, or have agreements for the distribution side, from the substation to the service at the home or business. There are 20 distribution cooperatives in South Carolina. On the transmission side, we have one G&T. It's a paper G&T, a generation and transmission utility. It doesn't own any generation, but it does own some transmission lines. And it has 20 members, and those 20 members are the 20 distribution cooperatives. And then from the G&T side, we have agreements with 3 different power organizations. One of them is Duke Energy Carolinas. Another one is Santee Cooper for approximately 75% of our energy. And then SEPA, which for some hydro, which is Southeastern Power Authority. And so all across the US, it really always starts with the distribution cooperative, and they either have agreements directly with investor-owned utilities to get their energy. They either own their own generation or it's a mix. And so it looks very different for cooperatives generally. The regulation and governance functions are primarily performed by the membership. The Public Service Commission usually doesn't play a much of a role, maybe for some territory assignments or statutory on the legislative side. You may have some oversight, but it's generally much less than you would have with a municipal or an investor-owned utility. And so really the 7 cooperative principles, this isn't just for electric utilities, but it's for cooperatives in general. It's really based on 7 principles: that it's voluntary and open membership for people that can be served by that service. And there's responsibilities when you accept that membership to the organization. It's democratic member control. In the case of electric cooperatives, if you are a member, whether you rent an apartment or you own a large industry, you have 1 vote. And so, and then they elect representatives for a board, and the board is what does the day-to-day governance or the big picture governance. It requires members' economic participation. Everybody owns a piece of the cooperative. Unlike an IOU where you have an investor-owned utility where you have a shareholder, there are no shareholders, they're members. And so there's no money made or lost in the cooperative. It's collected to meet the needs of the utility. And then if there's excess collection, because we didn't have many ice storms or hurricanes, then those capital investments are returned back to the members over time. Education, training, and information is very important. Cooperation among cooperatives, there's a lot of, within the 20 distribution cooperatives, they lean on each other heavily for expertise. And we also have regional and national organizations that consolidate, because cooperatives can range in size from 60 members to hundreds of thousands of members. In Texas, there's Pergonalis, which is a huge cooperative. And concern for the community. And so these 7 principles guide us in who we are and for good governance. Next slide, please. And so how do cooperatives decide on demand side management or energy efficiency programs? And really, the demand side management programs or energy efficiency are really tailored to the needs of that cooperative and its membership, period. And the programs do vary widely between the distribution cooperatives. The program can be initiated by management. It can be initiated by the board or a single member that has a common need. I've seen a weatherization program come from a single member that had a need. And when the management looked at it and the board looked at it, they said, you know what? I think a lot of our membership can benefit from this. And so if there is a popular demand side management or energy efficiency program, it may be managed by the G&T or a third party. And so in the case of Help My House in South Carolina, 7 cooperatives have come together to offer a weatherization program, and they lean on a third party to help them run the program and establish the standards. Evaluation, measurement, and verification is not nearly as stringent for cooperatives as it would be with a regulated utility. But one overriding measurement that we really pay attention to is member satisfaction. If the members aren't satisfied, we got to look really hard as to why are we doing this program. The advantage of being lightly regulated or regulated differently than having a public service commission is we can move very quickly to establish a program. And so we have a lot of flexibility if there's a need to put something together very quickly and get it going. And the same goes for if it's not working out, we can stand it down very quickly too. And we often partner with the community, with churches, with social service agencies to help run our program or meet individual members' needs or support them in the programs that they run. Thank you. And I think from here, we're handing it off to Patricia.
Thank you. Yes, and public power, which Santee Cooper is a public power utility, has a lot of the same tenets that Therese talked about with regards to the consideration of the demand side management programs, energy efficiency, as well as demand response. The only difference, as you'll see, as we start talking about this, is the board of directors. They're our primary governance. We have had a lot of, we are going to experience changes, manage changes over time with our board. The board members' terms are going to expire at the rate of 3 per year, and that'll continue through January 2025. And there'll not be any holdover capacity. If there is, there'll only be until a successor is appointed. And then we have 2 non-voting ex officio central representatives, and that comes from central electric cooperatives that Mike Smith was talking about, because central cooperatives load is such a big portion, 75% of our resources. And so we'll have on our board 1 non-voting director, will be the chair of central, and then 1 non-voting director will be the central board, a central board member. And then we have the voting board member changes include 4-year terms versus they used to be 7, and there is a 3-year term limit. And then there are new education and experience qualifications for those appointments and diversity standards for appointments. And then also, as Therese mentioned, the best interest test that the IOUs also go through. Next slide. Okay, and then our board of directors still needs to approve our debt issues. We don't have a rate of return that we get like the IOUs to the shareholders. We actually, through our statutes, we have a capital improvement fund that we collect for our capital projects, and for whatever money is needed above and beyond that capital improvement fund, then we will issue debt for it. And so our board approves that, but in conjunction with that, there is the Joint Bond Review Committee that is a part of the state, and it is an existing 10-member legislative committee, and it has the jurisdiction over approving certain state financing, including the colleges and universities in the state. And then we'll also have some oversight. Santee Cooper is a fair-sized landholder because of just our economic development goal of being the state's resource for a resource for economic development engine. And so as we buy or sell real estate, then the Joint Bond Review Committee will have approved that. And then when it comes to bonds, notes, or other indebtedness must be approved. And this does not apply to the short-term or revolving credit debt, such as commercial paper that is really used as short-term cash. It would be that the Joint Bond Review would be looking at long-term debt, and that debt can be issued over a 3-year time period, and it can be multiple debt issues. Next slide. And then for our integrated resource planning, when we put together our load forecast and it doesn't meet, and it has more requirements in it for generation and transmission than we currently have, then we have to include that in an integrated resource plan. And so the Public Service Commission will have oversight over that, and we'll have to submit the integrated resource plan every 3 years. And what goes in that plan is generation facilities greater than 75 megawatts, transmission facilities 125 kV or greater, and then non-renewable energy purchase agreements that are longer than 10 years. And then we also have to go out for bid for renewable generation. Right now we have purchased renewable generation capacity out of some projects in Newberry and throughout the state, some solar in Colleton County and things like that. Okay. And then the rate making oversight. Our board of directors still has sole rate making authority, but there's the Act 90 of 2021 that was just passed in May put into place an exclusive process for stakeholders to challenge rate adjustments that the board has approved. And so if anything in our rate cases don't make sense, then, if there's some special interest group that has qualms with the rate adjustment, then they can certainly challenge those rate adjustments. And the Office of Regulatory Staff will also inspect, audit, and examine the proposed rate adjustment. And it's an interested party with the right to appeal also the proposed rate adjustment. And then it also annually looks at our pricing report, because St. Cooper is what's called cost of service. Essentially, what it costs us to serve our customers is what our rates are based on. So that essentially we come to a net zero every year, where our expenses and the revenues from the rates that we collect essentially total back to zero, net out to zero. And that was all that I had on the public utilities. And then for the municipal utilities, St. Cooper does serve 3 municipal utilities, and just as an oversight of how those are done, we just serve them with electricity, but they have their own governance within that. Typically, it's a leader of the municipal electric utility is a director of the electric utility, but that director of the electric utility is hired by and reports directly to the city administrator. So Easley, Seneca, Bamberg, Georgetown, Union, those are all municipal types of utilities. And so they have a city administrator. The city administrator is hired by the mayor. And then you have the mayor and city council who are elected by the constituents of the city. And so the general criteria to become a council member must be a resident of the city. And then the term of the mayor and council members is typically 4 years. And then the city council has the authority to approve the rate adjustment that's being recommended, typically by the CFO and budget director. The rate adjustment process is that it's a public hearing that's conducted to discuss the rate adjustment amount and to be transparent about what the drivers of the rate adjustment are and seek public comment. And there will be 2 readings of the rate adjustments before approval. And then also another part that comes along with rate adjustments and funding for capital.
Patricia, I think we might have lost you. Patricia, are you on mute?
Yeah, I think her videos.
Okay, I'm gonna then probably move us along here. Actually, she was pretty much at the end, so that actually was a really good time for her to go out. So I wanted to thank all of you for providing that background. As you can see, there's a lot of differences between the different types of utilities, but also some similarities as well. And so I think this was a really good way for us to understand the differences between them. I don't see any specific questions on that, although please continue to drop your questions in the chat. I did see, Emily, your question for Mike Smith on programs. We're going to be discussing that in another section. So I'm going to hold on to that question and we will make sure that that's covered in the section when we talk about types of programs. So I'm going to move us on and have a little bit more of a panel discussion for how you all can engage with the utilities. And so this could include things like stakeholder groups, collaboratives, as Therese mentioned, different utility dockets, annual meetings, public hearings, and other things. And so I wanted to give each of our panelists a chance to talk a little bit more about how their utilities engage with the stakeholders. And so let's kind of let's work a little bit from the middle out. How about we talk a little bit with Linda from Duke Energy.
Well, Duke has a robust stakeholder engagement group related to our DSMEE programs. It's made up of any interested stakeholder. That's what the charter document says. And we meet every other month for 4 to 5 hours to discuss our DSMEE programs. The folks there are privy to information that doesn't go out to the general public. We bring in subject matter experts and program managers, and the group itself sets the agenda and sets our priorities for the year. We get great ideas from our stakeholder group, and even more importantly, it's just a gut check to make sure that we haven't forgotten anything, or that we're not so in our utility bubble that we forget to worry about the people that we're designing these programs for. So we get ideas about, marketing, partnerships, agencies we can work with, all kinds of things. In addition to that, we have our annual proceedings before the Public Service Commission each year. And folks are welcome to join in with that, although less of that happens from the general public. Most of our engagement for DSMEE comes through our collaborative. And although I facilitate the one that's for North and South Carolina, we also have a collaborative in Florida where we have a service territory, Indiana, and Ohio. So.
Great, thank you, Linda. And let's go to Jeff for a little bit more on the IOU stakeholder engagement.
Hey, great, thanks. We at Georgia Power do have a collaborative process as well. It's made up of the company employees as well as our Public Service Commission staff, and then various advocacy groups. And like what Linda described, we meet quarterly, and it's an all-day meeting each time we meet, and it's really around our program design process, the programs that we're currently implementing, and required third-party evaluations and the status of all of those. Therese hit on it earlier, and it's fair for Georgia Power to say as well. I would say 75% or more of those discussions do tend to focus on income qualified and energy burdened customer groups, and what we can try to work together and come up with collaborative processes and programs around that. And then we also have a different type of process that's more ad hoc, that comes in relationships with cities and advocacy groups that are specific to a city, or community action agencies that are specific to a city, and are try to figure out how to combine resources and simplify processes for customers to participate in income qualified programs as well. I think all of the investor owns have utility dockets that is a way to engage with utilities. It's usually late in the process if it's the different dockets that we're talking about in these times. So we like to have those conversations leading up to dockets. And then obviously annual meetings and public hearings do present themselves for Georgia Power customers and special interest groups as well.
Great, thank you, Jeff, for all that great information. And Therese, I know you talked about a few of these. Is there anything you wanted to add from Dominion's perspective?
Well, our DSMEE group meets 3 times a year. We are required to meet at least twice a year, but we found that 3 times was a better number of meetings to increase the level of collaboration. We are required to have certain members, so the Office of Regulatory Staff is engaged, we have environmental groups engaged, we have low-income groups engaged, and we have both small business and large industrial customers engaged in our group. And it ranges all the topics that Linda and Jeff talked about. They bring ideas for topics, and they also present if they have a subject that they'd like to talk through. We've done that around marketing and low income, serving low income customers in particular.
Great. Thanks, Therese. Let's turn to the co-ops. Mike, you want to talk a little bit about stakeholder engagement?
Yes. So for us, our big event every year is the annual meeting. Each of our board members are elected for 3-year terms. And so the annual meeting is the place to kind of get to know who everybody is from your board to who's running the cooperative. Calling the cooperative directly with a concern. Usually you should get a personal response. And I see a lot of programs kind of get started off with that personal need engagement. Like I have this issue and I need your help. And I'd say that's probably the best ways to do it, is just don't hesitate to pick up the phone, call the manager of your co-op, or call your representative directly. And you should be able to find all that information on the website. One of the advantages I mentioned earlier about the cooperatives is that they can move very quickly to stand up a program. And I would say a disadvantage, if you're trying to get a picture of the entire state, is there's a lot of variation from one co-op to another. And I think a lot of that comes from they're individually tailoring and meeting the needs of their community. And it varies from co-op to co-op.
Great. Thank you, Mike. And Patricia, we're going to try going back to you, talk a little bit more about the public utilities.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what
No,
happened.
you're there. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so from the perspective of stakeholder groups, we are we have mainly our commercial industrial stakeholder groups that we are talking with on a regular basis. We do have customer advisory councils that we meet with quarterly, and one of the things that under this Act 90 that was just put into place in 2021 is that we will fall more into what the IOUs are doing with these collaborative processes. So we will, we're looking forward to hearing more. We do surveys. We have we're in contact with our local action agencies. Waccamaw EOC is one of the ones that we work with quite a bit. And so, but certainly we'll be doing more through this collaborative process that Therese and Linda and Jeff are talking about.
Great, thank you all. And I don't see any questions, so I may move us on to the next one, and some questions may come to mind. But just to reiterate, there's a lot of different ways that stakeholders can get engaged with their particular utilities that they work with, and so I encourage everyone to take advantage of those. Let's move on to our last section of questions here, and then we can open it up for more broad questions. Wanted to talk about the types of programs offered to address energy insecurity. So, as we were hearing in kind of the first session, there were a lot of different programs already offered today by the utilities. And so we wanted to kind of focus in on some of those and talk about maybe some new things that might be coming down the line. Mike, I will just point out that there was a question in the chat from Emily specifically about rural electric cooperatives. So if you could address her question when you answer, that would be great. And actually, I might just start with you.
Okay, sounds good. And so I want to read her question really quickly. And one thing I didn't understand is where it talks about the issue of deferrals for EE upgrades. If I can get a little bit more clarity on that question. But here's an example of a couple programs that are offered by the cooperatives. For demand side management, we have a water heater program. Some cooperatives, if you are willing to allow your water heater to be controlled on our peaks, they will give you a brand new water heater and maybe charge you $5 a month, and they'll maintain it for you if you ever have any issues. And usually it's a large scale water heater that they put a device on that turns it off during our peaks. And most people don't even notice because the water heater is a large energy storage device. And then the other thing is a weatherization program that some of the cooperatives offer that where we facilitate getting brand new heat pump, weatherization done on the home. And the cost of that is put together in a loan and put on the member's electric utility bill for the course of 10 years to pay it off. But it's designed in such a way that your savings should more than cover the cost of that loan. And what's nice about a program like that is it does reach a lot of low and moderate income, because we don't do a traditional credit check. We just make sure that you are a cooperative member in good standing. And as long as you own the property, then we can include you in the program.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Let's go to Patricia to talk a little bit about the public utilities.
Okay, so some of the programs that we offer for low-income households, we do a house call kit, and it has different energy saving measures. We do energy audits for free. Something that has been very successful has been prepaid meters, because if you don't want to have a surprise at the end of the month, then just like a prepaid cell phone, that's kind of what a prepaid meter is. And so we've had a lot of interest in that. And then, of course, we have energy efficiency programs, a whole suite of those programs for the home, ranging from air sealing all the way to heat pump replacement. We do have a loan program that will finance these upgrades. We will be offering a customer assistance, a bill assistance program starting in 2022. And that is going to be funded by our, initially by some seed money from our customers, and then also our employees. And this will aid our customers in crisis and have a need to pay their power bill. I saw there was a question. Is that question for me?
Yeah, I'll save those to the end. It looks like it's just a general question. So let me save those. So thank you, Patricia. And I'm going to turn over to the IOUs again. Let's start with Jeff.
Yeah, we've got a variety of different programs and services that we offer that address energy insecurity. We do have both online and in-home energy audits, as well as advisory, assistance that folks can call in and ask questions around energy assistance. Programmatically, when we talk about energy efficiency specific programs, we've got 4 that we focus on with our customers in the energy insecurity or energy burdened area. But the first of which is a deep retrofit program. It's designed to reduce customers' energy by at least 15%, and it goes beyond weatherization. It's more, system updates, insulation, duct sealing, that type of whole home air sealing. And what's unique about it is there's an amount that we'll spend per home through the energy efficiency programs, but it also has a crowdfunding aspect of it, to where other customers, companies, philanthropic groups have the opportunity to donate money into the process as well, to help homes in their communities either reach more homes or do more work than would be funded through what comes through our integrated resource plan process. We have another program that focuses on income qualified multifamily apartment rehabs, into where we can go in and get deeper energy savings while the remodel is going on of the property. And again, that focuses on 25% energy reduction or better when we're in that process. We do have a program where we work with a large faith-based organization throughout the state, and they focus mainly on income qualified widows or widowers and helping to seal their homes. It is more of a traditional weatherization program. And then lastly, we have a pilot program, which is built around the pay-as-you-save model. It's not specifically that program, but it is a pilot that we're working with 500 homes in the highest energy burden zip codes in our service territory, and we will do deep retrofits or improvements onto the homes. We'll do an average of about $7,500 worth of improvements per home, and then they pay back that investment through a tariff and a shared savings component of where 80% of what they save goes to pay back the utility for the investment, and then they keep 20% of what's saved to help with their financial situation. So that's the offerings that we have in this space right now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. Linda, how about from Duke Energy?
Sure. So you'll see a lot of overlap between what Duke does and Dominion and Georgia Power as far as the content of these programs. You know, we have similar ones to the ones that have already been mentioned. You know, we cover multifamily, we cover neighborhoods like Therese was describing earlier. We also have a weatherization program that works in conjunction with the community action agencies in our DEC territory. We've run a number of pilots here recently, and we're really looking at several pilots to figure out how to tap into that last mile of hard to reach customers. And so some interesting things that we're looking at now in North Carolina, we have a pay for performance pilot that has partnered with a couple of agencies in the Buncombe County area, and we're partnering with them to get deeper and more energy efficiency measures installed in the home. We recently wrapped up a pilot in Durham where we paired shareholder dollars, the Helping Homes Fund, along with EE dollars, and we're looking at best practices from that to see if there's a way we can roll that out. As a result of our North Carolina rate case, we're working on 2 new pilot opportunities, and we've committed to have those either filed before the commission or a status update on where those are towards getting filed before the commission in North Carolina before October of next year. One is a low income pilot. We have a list of things we want to learn from that and stakeholders that are helping us with it. And another is a tariff on bill pilot program. Again, we've got lots of folks that are weighing in on that from our DSME collaborative and also from the stakeholder group. Did I cover everything? I've seen some questions come through that I wanted to address, but I might hold off since we're on the programs part, and I'll just go back if somebody wants clarification about other things.
Yeah, let's round out with Therese on Dominion's programs, and then there are a lot of really good questions in there. We'll turn to the questions. Therese, you want to bring us home?
Sure, I'll be brief. So in addition to the program I mentioned earlier, the neighborhood program, we offer a weatherization program for mobile homes. Mobile homes are pretty, I guess you could say there are a lot of mobile homes in our service territory. I want to say maybe in South Carolina, it's somewhere around 19% of the residents are mobile homes. And so we have a specific effort around weatherizing mobile homes in our service territory. So whenever we go into a neighborhood with the low income program, we're also looking for mobile homes to weatherize. And that includes everything from duct sealing and insulation, belly board insulation, reflective roof coating, air sealing. So all of those building envelope measures that make the biggest difference. I will say at a high level in terms of how we look at our programs, we're always looking at how can we get deeper savings? How can we drive deeper savings into the program, especially reaching these hard to reach communities, which include low to moderate income, small businesses. So we're always trying to figure out, what can we do to reach these customers? I talked about the evaluation bar that we have to reach in terms of the requirements for performance. The other measurement that is prominent in these IOU programs is around cost effectiveness. So all of the programs have to be cost effectiveness to qualify for recovery in the DSM rider. And so that is a constant challenge, and something that we're always dealing with is how can we do more and keep the program cost effective. So it's kind of a balancing act that we tweak regularly. So I just kind of wanted to mention that because I think sometimes people look at the utilities and think, well, why don't you just do more to solve the problem? But there are a lot of barriers to just doing more. So it's got to be cost effective. It's got to pass these EM&V requirements. So there's a lot out there that we have to overcome in order to be able to deliver.
Great, and that's a really good point, Therese, especially for the IOUs from that cost effectiveness test perspective. Want to turn to a couple of the questions. I'm going to kind of go in order right now. This one's getting a little bit what we haven't discussed yet, but is a very good question about disconnections and whether the data, if there's a standard way that the data is presented across the different types of utilities, and is there anything required to make this public so that others can see it?
Well, I'll jump in for this. We recently began reporting our disconnections as part of a separate COVID-related docket in South Carolina. Before that, I'm not aware of a public forum where we had to report disconnections. It would sometimes come up during our rate cases, but not in a public way. As you can imagine, that's not something that we would willingly give up just because of customer privacy issues. There's not a uniform way unless one has been prescribed in that COVID docket. There wasn't one before that. So that's it from the Duke perspective.
And I'd add for the cooperatives, we did voluntarily report our disconnections and the changes, during COVID and afterward, also to the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Yeah, and I can just say I have an intern right now at Duke that is looking at the different states and what the disconnection data that's available publicly through the PSCs, and it definitely varies across the states. And so, thinking through some standardized way to report on it probably would be a very useful thing for this region to do. Good question, thank you. There was a question on, sorry, and I skipped over a tariffed-on bill that Steve Rundle had asked. I think it was answered by Mike Smith, but if in the chat, but if you have an additional follow-up question, Steve, please let us know. Wanted to turn to Don Howitt's question about a lot of utilities are starting to offer discounted rates to income qualified residential customers. Is this something that any of your utilities are looking to implement?
Again, I'll chime in. We have begun in South Carolina. I think it's further underway in South Carolina and recently beginning in North Carolina, a comprehensive rate overview. And one of the working groups that is meeting as a result of our North Carolina rate case is to look at affordability and rate design as part of our affordability. So while we don't offer anything yet, we are looking at it. If we came to a conclusion that would be a workable solution for our customers, that would have to go through our commissions in each state and be approved as part of an overall rate case. So you're looking at a couple-year process probably to get that designed, applied for, approved, and implemented. But my understanding, it is something that we're taking a look at.
Same here for Dominion Energy. In fact, we are on the tail end of our rate case, our electric rate case in South Carolina, and as a part of the settlement agreement that the commission is expected to rule on in the next week or so, there is a working group to look at income qualified rates. And it would require legislative approval as well as regulatory approval. So 2 years is conservative when you involve the legislature, as you well know.
And I'd like to address two things here too. One of them is Daniel Tate's comment about Southeastern utilities underperforming. I'd like to recognize that some of our members are really fall in the category of having a tremendously high energy burden. I think some of the, it's a combination of many things to include a quarter of our membership lives in manufactured homes, and for a long time, they came standard with an electric furnace, so that uses a lot of energy in the wintertime. And for special rates for low or moderate income, it's a real challenge for cooperatives. Since we're member owned, if you give a group of our members a discounted rate, it is paid for by our other membership. And so we have this tension of offering programs that have a cost for those that don't benefit directly from it. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on the part about why Southeast Utilities consistently underperform as well. I think it's important to look at a couple of things. Number one is the climate that the Southeast has and how much of our load is weather related. And so, oftentimes we'll hear, well, why doesn't your utility meet 1% every year? Why don't they reduce their by 1%? They do it in Vermont, they do it in Minnesota, and the measure mix is different in the other states. We have a lot of electric heat, and 1% when your average customer is consuming 400 kilowatt hours a year is a lot easier than 1% when your average customer is consuming 1,300 kilowatt hours a year. So that's different. We also have consistently low rates. Now, I'm not saying we have consistently low bills, but we have consistently low rates, which makes the financial component that underpins the cost effectiveness of these programs a little more difficult for us. When you're looking at, say, California, where it's 30 cents a kilowatt hour, it's a lot easier to make programs pencil out than when you're looking in the Southeast, where we're running, a half to a third of that, depending on where you are. So that makes it difficult too. And then I'm just gonna say, just kind of toot Duke Energy's horn a little bit. When you look at energy savings in the Southeast for 2019, I think the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy just recently put out their 2019 report. Duke Energy was responsible for 59% of those. So I feel like we have regulatory support, though, in the Carolinas. We have a good model for how we can earn. Our commissions recently approved our ability to make our low-income programs more sustainable by being more financially attractive to the utility. And so we are, as a result, going to look at expanding our low-income programs. And when you have a good, solid regulatory model, and you have some regulatory consistency, and you have some collaboration and cooperation among your regulators, like Duke has enjoyed in the Carolinas over the past 10 years, that really helps a lot.
And to add on to that too, Linda, at least for Georgia Power, if you increase the program size, therefore it increases the program's cost, and those costs get passed through to all customers. And so the income qualified or energy burdened customers' costs go up unless they are a participant. And so you can't hit them all at one time. So you have to balance the benefits of the programs versus the upward pressure it puts on rates for all customers. And so that weighs on the benefit of program participation versus the cost of the programs.
Great, thank you all. So we have 1 minute left. Any final thoughts from anyone else before we leave?
I'll jump in again. Sorry, I just can't help myself. But if there's one thing from the utility standpoint that would be really helpful is, our job is basically to generate and sell electricity. And we depend on organizations to help get our programs out, to get word of our programs out. And so the more coordinated and uniform the agencies are that we work with, then the easier it is to get these programs to the people who actually need it. So, if I had a magic wand and could change something in the Carolinas, I would make the agencies that we work with more uniform, fewer points of contact, so that we can easily take a good idea and scale it across our entire service territory. The better our partnerships are and the better coordinated those partners are among themselves, the easier it is for us to do that and get help to the folks who actually need it.
Great. Thanks, Linda. Yes, the magic wand analogy, but yes, that was a very, very good, good recommendation. We are at time, and I just really want to thank the 5 panelists for joining us today and sharing their insight into their own utilities. I know there are probably a lot more questions that you all have, and I see a couple that are actually coming up in the chat as well. Please continue to send them to myself, Jen Weiss, or Allie Garrett, and we will put them together and get some answers back. If it seems like we need to have a follow-up SME webinar, I am sure that my panelists would love to come back and talk some more. So we could also do that if there's any particular topic that we want to dive into any more deeply. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to the panelists for being a part of it. And thank you to all of you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.